ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः Namaste my dear friends, Namaskar. This is fifth video on Viveka Chudamani of Adi Sankaracharya. This video starts with verse number 49. को नाम बंद है कथमेश आगत है कथम प्रतिष्ठास्य कथम विमोक्ष है को सावनात्मा ब्रह्म है कै आत्मा तयोर्विवेकः कथमेदुच्यताम्. What is bondage? How has it come? How does it continue to exist? How can one get out of it completely? What is the non-self? Who is the supreme self? And what is the process of discrimination between these two, self and not self? Please explain all these to me. This is a series of 7 questions which the student asks the teacher, who will now take them up one by one and answer them exhaustively. These questions exhaust almost the entire field of ignorance and ignorance created confusions. Therefore, they are not to be treated as a set of questions just casually asked by some individual. They are questions that would be asked by sincere seekers who are intellectually curious to know, to understand, to evaluate, and to have explained the confusing world of endless plurality. Thus, these questions give us an inkling into the type of questions to be asked and the spirit in which to open our discussion when we approach a divine master. To get to a saint with flowers and camphor, fruits and sweets is not the correct way of approaching one's spiritual guru. This tradition, though with the best of intentions, has only created a set of fruit gatherers as gurus and flower offerers as disciples, and together the two have dug deep the grave of sacred Vedanta and have there hosted the skeleton of Hinduism. These thirsty questions demanding an explanation for the sense of limitation and confusion experienced by us are each in itself an exhaustive declaration of the student's observations on life as it is available to him within and without. Again, they show the perspicacity with which the student has followed what the master has said so far. In all the previous verses, the teacher spoke in terms of bondages, liberation, not self, supreme self, and the discrimination between the self and the not self. Till now, these terms freely used, but the student is not satisfied with a mere understanding of the theories of Vedanta. He wants to live them in life. So he is now holding the teacher by the collar, as it were, and is pointedly asking him to explain more clearly. Naturally, the teacher catches the contagion of the boy's enthusiasm, and we shall see how beautifully he warms up to the discussion. Intelligent disciple appreciated. Stanza 50. Sri Gururuvach. धन्यो असि किरत्किरतो असि पावितं ते कुलं तवया यद्विद्या बन्धमुक्त्या brahmibhavittumichhasi. The Guru replied, "Blessed you are, for you wish to attain the absolute Brahma by freeing yourself from the bondage of ignorance. Indeed, you have fulfilled your life and have glorified your clan." The teacher's face now beams with a smile of satisfaction, and soon words expressing his joy at meeting such a perfect student flow out of him. The very fact that the boy has decided that he wants to be free from all his weaknesses, that he wishes to walk out into the boundless fields of perfection, has made him blessed. Not only has he glorified himself, but he has even sanctified his entire clan, Kulam. The word Kulam is not merely the family, it connotes all the ancestors and the future descendants, while family means only the present living members and the immediate forefathers. This is not a hyperbole. It has already been said that rare indeed are those who come to exhibit such a burning thirst for liberation among living creatures at any period of human history. Evidently, the boy is a highly evolved being, and hence he feels an acute impatience for liberation. In ordinary life, too, we use expressions such as baking the bread when we know that bread need not be baked. In such cases, we generally use the immediate future fulfillment to indicate the present activity. Similarly, the inquiry into life and its relationship with its cause, with a burning desire to live and accomplish the ultimate perfection in one's own self, is the present activity which will in a short time and in the final consummation of the purpose of life. Therefore, the teacher, in anticipation, declares that the boy has fulfilled the purpose of his life. Very rarely do we say the fetus in the womb. We invariably use the term the child in the womb, although in its prenatal condition it is not yet a child. To release ourselves from the shackles of ignorance is not merely to have knowledge, but transcending the ignorance created projection of the body, mind, and intellect. It is to live and experience reality in itself. Therefore, the teacher says, "You wish to attain Brahmahood, that is Godhood, glory of self effort." Stanza number 51. ऋण मोचन करतार पितुः संति सुता देह बंधन मोचन करता तो सव समादन्यो ने कश्चन. A father has his sons and others to save him from his financial debts, but to redeem himself from his delusions, there is none but himself. Stanza number 52. Mast kanne bhar derdo mannai nirvayate apsudhadikrit dukham tu vinasven ne kenchit. Exhaustion and fatigue caused by carrying a load on the head can be relieved by others coming to one's help, but none can save one's own self, can end the pangs caused by hunger, etc. Stanza 53. Pathyam औषधसेवा च क्रियते येन रोगिणा आरोग्य सिद्धिर्दृष्टस्य na anne anushti karmana. The patient who faithfully follows the right diet and takes the proper medicine alone is perceived to recover from his illness. No one recovers because another undergoes the treatment. In these three verses, the Master is trying to drive home the importance of self effort upon the student. Any amount of hearing, study, intellectual thinking, and logical discussion cannot by themselves bring about liberation from our misconceptions and false evaluations in life. Textbooks on culture and tradition and missives on religion are not talismans which can keep the Satan away. In order to impress this idea upon the student, the teacher gives three verses with three different examples. These homely analogies, which fall within the experience of everyone, are given to remove any possible misunderstanding of the student regarding the technique of self-realization. All the objective sciences in the world can be mastered by merely studying them. The man who studies the law of the country with all its implications can become a lawyer. He who studies the symptoms of diseases and their cures can become a doctor. An advocate of criminal law need not be a criminal himself. A doctor need not himself be a patient to know the science of medicine. But Atam Vidya is gained only when it has brought about a complete regeneration of the individual who studies it. After gaining the objective knowledge, there must also be a subjective achievement. You may learn to play an instrument and be able to do so faultlessly, but it is inspiration alone which makes an artist. Your painting might be exactly like a photograph, but unless you have grasped the essence of what you are painting and are able to express it, you will only be a craftsman and not an artist. It is therefore that no teacher, however great he may be, can impart the subjective knowledge to a student. All the teacher can supply is a clear vision of what is involved, a glimpse of the goal to be achieved, and logical arguments to convince the student of the blessedness and perfection of both the goal and the path. The examples given in the three verses are very telling. A father may be suffering agony and mental agitations due to his debts. In such a case, his children, dutiful and sympathetic, Sympathetic can certainly relieve him from his debts by their cooperation and help, but the sorrows and agitations which are due to his spiritual delusion can be relieved only by himself. None else can do it. If a traveler is fatigued and exhausted because of the extremely heavy load he is carrying on his head, he can be helped and relieved by fellow travelers. Nay, even an inanimate load rest can relieve the man. But the pangs he suffers from hunger, which is an inner disturbance, cannot be removed by somebody else eating a sumptuous dinner on his behalf. To remove hunger, his own stomach must receive the food and be appeased. The teacher, not satisfied with these two striking examples, adds yet another verse to drive home to the student the necessity for conscious personal effort. He says only those patients are cured of their ailments who faithfully follow the prescribed diet and take the right medicines themselves. A person suffers because of some maladjustment in his physical system, and the medicine must be assimilated and absorbed by his body so that it may remove the causes of his illness. One cannot cure one's illness by the medicines another has taken. In fact, health is the natural condition of man. Some cause or causes enter the system which obstruct the experience of the body's true vitality, and the person suffers. The medicine does not create health, it only removes the causes of ill health. Similarly, the misunderstandings created by ignorance can be removed, and the conditions required for a fuller expression of the reality can be brought about in him only by his own efforts. In short, each one of us must walk the path by himself, but properly guided by the instruction of the teacher and the scriptures. Stanza number 54. Vastu Savrupam Saput Bodh Chaksusa Savinne Vedam No Tu Panditen Chandra Savrupam Nij Chaksu Saiv Gyatavve Mani Gamyate Kim. The actuality of things is to be known by a first-hand personal experience through the eye of clear understanding and not through the reports of learned men. The beauty of the moon is enjoyed through one's own eyes. Can one appreciate it through the description by others? Sankara reinforces the idea in the above three examples with yet another verse, hammering as it were the last nail on the coffin of our doubts. The beauty, the brilliance, the soft glory, the queenly dignity, the serene consolation, the message of love and leisure, of peace and quietude, which the moon sheds as it glides across the springtime skies, cannot indeed be captured in words but are experiences to be enjoyed subjectively only. The vision of its majesty is to be perceived by one's own eyes and experienced in satisfying suggestive silence. A blind man cannot enjoy the love messages of a moonlit night. When the self rises in the dark bosom of our ignorance and glides across the horizon of our experiences, That experience cannot be described fully to us by another, even though he may have experienced it himself. Each must experience it from himself in himself. This analogy of moonrise is indeed the most poetic and by far the most appropriate example to indicate the soft silvery light of knowledge that illumines with its sublime peace and perfection the dark atmosphere in the bosom of the ignorant. Stanza 55. Avidya काम कर्मादि पास बंधम विमोचितुम कह शक्नु शक्नुया दिव्यात्मानं कल्पकोटि सत्रपि. Who else but oneself can help rid oneself of the bondage caused by the change of ignorance, desire, action, etc., even in 100 crore of kalpas? The bondage felt by the mortal is caused by the ignorance of his own real nature. This ignorance of his own all fullness in his spiritual personality creates in his intellect waves of desires with which he expects to make himself full. Desires create in his mind thought waves, and thoughts express themselves as action. These three, ignorance, desire, and action, are together called in Vedanta Shastra as the heart knots. Hirdaya Granthi. These are the cords that bind the ego, Jiva, to the finitude and sorrows of a mortal. In this enumeration of ignorance, desire, action, when Sankara adds and the like, he means the residual impressions, vasanas, that are left on the mind when a desire prompted activity is consciously undertaken. These vasanas thicken the ignorance by darkening desires, agitating the thoughts, and propelling us into a world of frenzied activities. The Acharya naturally asks, who can save a man from the chaos in his mind and intellect which is responsible for his rapid activities in the world of objects and his painful confusions in his relationship with his fellow beings? The answer is contained in the question itself, none but he himself. The term kalpa is used to indicate the entire duration of one universe from its day of creation to its day of doom. It has been calculated that the light of the universe is one day of the Creator, which is equivalent to 432 million years in terms of calculation of time possible with our finite and limited time. Knowledge of the self, its beauty. Stanza number 56. Ne yogen ne sankhyen karmana no ne vidyaya ब्रह्मा आत्म कत्व बोधेन मोक्ष सिद्ध्यति न अन्यथा. Neither by yoga, nor by sankhya, nor by ritual, nor by learning is liberation possible. Only by the realization of one's identity with Brahma is liberation possible, not by any other means. None of the paths enumerated in this verse can take the student to his goal if he only mechanically follows it without an ardent and sincere cooperation. Altogether, there are 6 schools of philosophical thought in India, only some of them are mentioned here. Note that the others are positively against self-realization, against its principles. The few mentioned here include the rest. By the term yoga, Sankara means the path of mysticism developed and maintained through the exercises of Hatha Yoga. The Sankhya philosophy is one of the main fountainheads of Vedanta. Vedanta has sprung from its early roots and has ultimately reached a greater precision of thought and perfection of detail from what was only an elaborate philosophy. According to the Sankhya philosophy, essentially dualistic, the world is constituted of two intrinsic factors, Purusha and Prakriti, spirit and matter. Spirit is the sentient, intelligent, knowing principle, the vital factor, the source of all life that expresses through physical forms. Matter is insentient, unintelligent, and lifeless in itself, but it comes to exhibit the characteristics of life when it is blessed with a close proximity with the spirit. Purusha by itself cannot achieve or execute, but when matter comes in contact with it, it is charged with dynamism. The spring in the watch is inert. Then what makes the watch work? The tension in the spring. That is not an activity, it is dynamism. So the Purusha has no activity. All activities of life takes place when Purusha dons the robe of matter. Prakriti herself is inert. Purusha by himself has no activity. But when they are wedded to each other, both seem to gather divinity, might, and power as a result of each blessing the other. In this philosophical concept, the logic of thinking took the Sankhyans to a natural conclusion that Purusha reveling within one sample of matter is different from the Purusha in all others. Liberation from the entanglements of Prakriti is gained by Purusha when there is discrimination on all occasions and in all conditions, recognizing the eternal spirit as separate from finite matter. One step ahead of Sankhya is Vedanta. It explains that when one gains the true knowledge of the Purusha, the Atma, the yogi experiences that Prakriti is only a superimposition upon the Purusha, that there is in fact no such distinction. The Supreme alone is one without a second, revealing everywhere the subtlest of the subtle, the pure principle of consciousness. The term karma is here used to include and incorporate the Mimamsakas who believe that ritualistic activity, divine and sacred, yields for them merits to enjoy which they will be shifted to other realms of intense pleasure. When these merits are exhausted through enjoyment, they will return to physical forms for another period to earn more merits to enjoy another round of utmost pleasure. This for them is moksha. This is their ultimate concept of life. This they consider amritatvam. The term Vidya may be taken both in its Vedic connotation and in its literal dictionary meaning. In its Vedic application, Vidya means upasana, concentrated and devoted meditation, wherein the intellect tries to get away from its circumscribing vanities through a deliberate identification with a vaster concepts as I am prana, the all-pervading, or I am the sun, the almighty, or I am fire, the effulgent, or I am Indra, the omnipotent, etc. Vidya, in its other sense, means mere learning or book knowledge. All these are in themselves only techniques of self development but are not the goal. The Calcutta route is not Calcutta, the Bombay route is not Bombay. Of course, they both, if consistently pursued, will certainly take us to Calcutta or to Bombay. Having reached in neither of the cities will we find the stretches of the roads we travelled in order to reach them. Yoga, Vidya, etc. are all means, they do not represent the end. The goal is in realizing that the self in us is the same self in everything and being. This realization of the divine nature of man, individually experienced each for himself, is the only method by which we can be liberated from the bondages of intellectual restlessness, mental agitations, and physical cravings. To avoid any trace of doubt that might still linger in the mind of the student, that there is perhaps some method other than yoga, Sankhya, etc., which has not been described by the teacher, Sankara says point blank and by no other means. Realization of the self is the only method. There are no other means by which our present experiences of finitude and limitations can be destroyed root and branch. Stanza number 57. Veenaya Roop Saundriya Tantri Vadan Saustvam Parjarajan Matram Tan Samrajyaye Kalpate. The beauty of the Veena and the proficiency of one playing on its chords serve but to please an audience. They do not by themselves ever prove sufficient to confirm full sovereignty. In using analogies, nobody has yet come to the field of philosophy who can rival Sankara's efficiency and perfection. According to him, the schools of philosophy which argue emphatically, describe beautifully, and enunciate exhaustively discussions that give clear intellectual pictures of the why and wherefore of this universe are all nothing but the beauty of the words or the eloquence of the speaker. The player of an instrument with his proficiency may entertain the largest conceivable audience, and for the time being, the listeners may even consider him the king of artists. Yet, in effect, he can never gain sovereignty permanent and complete over the audience through the instrument. Similarly, the various schools of philosophy are intellectual entertainments, no doubt, yet the seeker cannot gain the status of godhood by merely dabbling in philosophy. A king might entertain himself and his friends by playing the veena, but his empire is not consolidated, nor is order maintained among the people, nor is royal dignity nourished through his proficiency in the instrument. Acharya Sankara wants to emphasize that any amount of philosophical studies, even a mastery over all the six schools of philosophy, cannot bring about a complete evolutionary evolutionary fulfillment. The term Samrajya has a reminiscent Upanishadic flavor. In ancient literature, this term is used for the kingdom of God within in the heart of every individual. Stanza number 58. वाग्वैखरी शब्दझरी शास्त्र व्याख्यान कौशलम वैदुष्यम विदुष्याम तद्वद भुक्तये नैतु मुक्तये. Loud speech in a stream of words, the efficiency in expounding or commenting upon the Shastras, erudition, these bring only a little joyous material satisfaction to the scholar, but they are insufficient to liberate him completely. The Yoga Shastra gives us the various subtle stages of metamorphosis of a thought or a desire before it is expressed in the form of sounds and words. Altogether, it describes four distinct stages in a thought's manifestation as an expression in words. First of all, the thought arises from or has contact with the reality or life in us, and at this stage it is called pra. When it manifests sufficiently for the ego in us to be conscious of it, it is in a state grosser than the previous one, and at this stage of its perceptible existence, it is called pashyanti. A thought of which we have become conscious passes through a state of inner moulding in the crucible of language, and this state of transcribing thought into a series of symbolical sounds for the purpose of conveying it to another is called madhyama. And when actually the symbols indicated by the mind are relayed through expressed audible sounds, the thought in its grossest manifestation is called vakri. By the term vakri, Sankara means the unproductive and noisy discussions on philosophy which some students of Vedanta engage in. These gabblers are laughed at, condemned, and quite ignored by all the great acharyas like Sankara. To the rishis, an ounce of practice is more sacred than tons of discussion around a table. According to Sankara, mere knowledge of philosophical thoughts can be used only for purposes of eking out a profit for one's own livelihood or for gaining some insignificant popularity or short-lived glory. Stanza number 59. अविज्ञाते परे तत्वे शास्त्रधीतस्तु निष्फला विद्यतेऽपि परे तत्वे शास्त्र adhistasthu निष्फला. Without knowing the supreme reality, the study of the Shastras is futile. Having known the supreme reality, the study of the Shastras is again futile. Here is an exquisite example of the use of a deliberate statement of contradiction to hammer a point into a student while creating in him a sense of wonderment. The verse, even in its 10th reading, leaves a staggering sense of amazement and confusion. Wonder is an emotion in which there is a dizzy pause in thinking, and at such a moment of intellectual arrest, the verse filters through. When one realizes the meaning fully, it goes straight into the deepest vaults of one's heart cave. The paradox is resolved when we give a little conscious application of purified intellect on the word knowing in both the lines of the verse without knowing in the first and having known in the second. In both cases, knowing connotes a different meaning, the literal and the indicative. In the first line, it means intellectually understanding, and in the second line, it means realizing. In the light of these interpretations, the verse becomes a clear statement of truth. As long as we have no right intellectual appreciation of what the Vedanta text indicate, all study of the scriptures is futile. Again, when we have realized the truth, study of the scriptures is redundant. Elsewhere in Vedantic literature, it is said that the efforts of all the Vedas is ultimately to deny the existence of plurality, which is a sorrowful dream projected by the individual mind, a delusion superimposed upon the Atma, the substratum. All arguments that we can marshal to convince a deluded friend that what he perceives is not a ghost but only a harmless post constitute the scriptures indicating the post. Naturally, therefore, any man of realization reading even the best of scriptures must laugh indulgently at the colossal inefficiency of Mother Shruti. And those who have no conception of reality, to them no scriptural study can give even a trace of thrill. We read in Vedanta that to such immature intellects, the Upanishads are empty words, just as children can never understand the physical thrill of married life, so too, poor things, they have not the instruments to understand or the maturity to comprehend the truth. Then, as they grow, even if it is not taught, they will instinctively learn to feel or to know. Stanza number 60. Sabad jalam maharanyam chit bharman karanam atah pariyat jajatavyam tattve sattvam matmanam. Commentaries on philosophies constitute a thick jungle in which a roaming mind may easily get lost in its own delusion. Therefore, true seekers of Brahma should, through right efforts, come to experience the real nature of the self. In this brilliant metaphor, the Acharya woos both poetry and philosophy with the ardor and fervor of a true and noble lover, handling the philosophy and dandling the poetry as it were. Here he conveys to us the idea that mere philosophical discussion is a dangerous jungle, dark and dreary, with luxuriously growing poisonous weeds and prowling beast lying in ambush, ready to pounce upon innocent, unsuspecting pilgrims. No better description of the dialectics could be given of the endless arguments of the six schools of Indian philosophy, each trying to disapprove the others to establish its own point of view. Into this jungle infested with dangerous flora and fauna, if an unprepared or innocent mind, frail in strength, carelessly enters, it might get attacked or destroyed by the lurking dangers. Even an intellectual master of great erudition and perfect scholarship can now and then tumble down into unseen potholes and suffer mental repercussions. So, the warning given here by the benevolent Acharya is of extreme service to initiates entering the portals of Vedanta. Let not the new seekers enter with hasty enthusiasm into such jungles of noisy confusion. The chances are that their minds will get overburdened with contradictory assertions of the great champions of the different philosophical viewpoints, and they will ultimately get lost in the blind alleys of wordy arguments. Therefore, a seeker should set about only after knowing the true nature of the self through the method of Atam Vichara. When he has fully acquired the necessary qualifications for it through upasanas and meditations. Stanza number 61. अज्ञान सर्वदृष्टस्य ब्रह्मज्ञान औषधं विना किमु वेदैश्च शास्त्रश्च किमु मन्त्रैः किम औषधैः. For him who has been stung by the cobra of ignorance, the only remedy is the knowledge of Brahma. Of what use are the Vedas and the scriptures, mantras and medicines to such a victim of poison? The Supreme, poisoned as it were by self forgetfulness, has come to suffer the burning agony of limitations and sorrows. It has forgotten its divine nature and identifying with the matter envelopments, it sobs at its mortality, its sorrows, its imperfections. To one who has realized these and has come to feel a choking impatience to be relieved from the tyranny of pain, nothing short of self discovery can be satisfying. A victim of the snake bite of ignorance can be relieved of his painful delirium only by self realization. Only then can he live as the spirit, the reality in everything and being. It is it is natural that when a person realizes that he has been beaten by a cobra, he will have none of the ordinary prejudices of faith, creed, position, status, time, or place. Any help that reaches him from any quarter, offered in any attitude, will be most welcome. In that moment of dire sorrow, in the magnitude of his tragedy, he realizes the urgency of the situation, and his only demand is for some antidote to the poison which can restore him to natural health and vitality. Similarly, no sooner a seeker realizes that he has been beaten by ignorance, the most dangerous of all serpents in the wild jungles of uncultured and uncultivated hearts, then he will take the best from the Shastras and will try to imbibe immediately the specific cure for ignorance, the knowledge of the real. To such a one, of what avail then are the slower, the more comfortable means of study of the Vedas and Shastras, repetition of mantras and dizzy philosophical arguments. Stanza number 62. Direct experience liberation. Ne gachti vina panam vyadhi vyadhir औषध शब्दस्तय विना प्रोक्ष अनुभवम ब्रह्म शब्देनर मुच्यते. A disease is not cured by merely repeating the name of the medicine and without taking it, without direct realization, by a mere utterance of the word Brahma, none can be liberated. How and why mere chanting of a mantra is by itself considered important is explained here. Any person suffering from ignorance cannot expect to be cured by merely repeating the word Brahma, the name of the absolute reality. Repeated utterances of Aham Brahmasmi or a mechanical murmuring of endless Shivohams cannot by themselves produce any cure. However effective the medicine may be, no patient is known to have been cured only by repeatedly reading a prescription. By merely repeating for hours the word aspirin when one is suffering from headache, one can only increase it. The only cure is to take the medicine and assimilate it till it becomes one with the patient. By this alone can he get complete relief. Similarly, a mere repetition of the sacred truths of Vedanta is futile without the struggle to raise ourselves to the subtler joys of a higher culture and a divine way of living by individually assimilating the truth of the Upanishads and becoming one with it by intimate personal experience. Subjective realization, most intimate and immediate, total and permanent, is called aproksha anubhava of the self. No doubt this must be preceded by an intellectual understanding of the truth called in Sanskrit proksha jnanam. Intellectual appreciation is the way to reach truth and a full subjective apprehensions of the self is the God. Liberation from our delusions can come only when they have ended in pure knowledge. Darkness can end only in the presence of light. Stanza number 63. Ekritva drasya vilem gyatva tato atmana brahm sabdai kuto mukti rukti matri phalain nirnam. Without achieving the disappearance of the entire pluralistic world and without realizing the real nature of the self, how can one achieve full liberation by a mere repetition of the word Brahma? Surely it will end only in a wasteful effort of speech. The conditions preceding the full state of liberation are explained here. In the white heat of intense meditation, when the mental rays of the individual have been made single pointed and turned completely inwards to recognize the self within, The world of perceptions gets eliminated in the experience just as the world of the dream naturally rolls away from the waker's comprehension. We perceive the pluralistic world from the levels of the body, the planes of the mind, and the peaks of the intellect. With the body, we recognize the waking state world of names and forms. With the mind, we perceive the world of feelings and emotions, and with the intellect, we recognize and experience our world of ideas which has no declared boundary. On transcending our identifications with the body, mind, and intellect, the world of plurality filtering into our consciousness through the sense organs gets absorbed as it were into what unfolds itself as the pure self, the truth. On waking from a dream, it cannot be said that the dream has rolled away into some other point of time and place. We will have to accept that the dreamer in us only because of our complete forgetfulness of real self as the waker. On waking, the dream is considered to have vanished. Similarly, on awakening to the full spiritual consciousness of Godhood, the world of change and finitude is experienced as having totally vanished. Without coming to this state of total self realization, even though for only a fleeting moment, there is no liberation possible from the instinctive weaknesses that one suffers because of one's false identifications. This is the way shown by our scriptures. This is the path by which an endless caravan of perfect men traveled to gain their goal in life. And in our own times also, many a noble soul has enjoyed the fulfillment of his mission in life, waking the very same path and attaining the very same goal. Lip Vedanta has never helped anyone to gain perfection. Mere discussion, idle repetition, boisterous arguments, these have never brought to anyone any substantial blessings except the exhaustion of over talking. Sankara urges the seeker to talk less and practice more. Stanza number 64. Akritva Satru Sangharam Gatva Khilam Bhu Shriyam Raja Hamiti Shabdanno Raja Bhavitur Tumrhati. Without eliminating his enemies and without bringing the entire land of his kingdom under his sway, by merely repeating, I am the emperor, one cannot become an emperor. It is necessary to fulfill all the required conditions in one's inner life before one can experience the infinite, the divine. Self mastery is a reward one comes to gain when one has conquered all the inner enemies and has come to rule over all the different matter provinces in one's personality. In this verse, the Acharya is throwing a flood of light on the previous declaration by an apt example. He is trying to make us understand that by mere verbal repetition, nothing will be accomplished. A fool who, without annihilating his enemies and without bringing with his own might and power all the provinces under his sway, just repeats that he is the emperor, can never become one for all his loud claims. Certain necessary conditions must be fulfilled before he can hope to gain the sceptre and the crown and be recognized as the emperor. An emperor has no enemies within his own empire, and everyone living in his empire is directly under his will and command. If these conditions are accomplished, he need not even announce or declare that he is the emperor. The world will do it for him. Similarly, if a seeker has successfully destroyed all his inner enemies of desires and thoughts, physical demands, mental appetites, and intellectual wanderings, and if he has established mastery over the vast province of the waking, dream, and deep sleep states of consciousness, he need not thereafter repeat, I am Brahma. For every cell in him, every thought, and every idea that rises in him will sing in chorus his sovereignty over all at all times and in all conditions. The idea that man's self effort in the right direction alone can make him rediscover for himself the spiritual essence in him to be divine and all powerful is vividly brought out by the following exquisite verse pregnant with suggestions, rich in melody, perfect in flow and rhythm. Now, at this point, I complete this video. Next video number 6 will start with stanza number 65 of Viveka Chudamani of Adi Sankaracharya. Namaste, dear friends. Thank you.